Good morning. Not as sunshiny a morning as it was yesterday. Lots of news to cover today, so let's just go ahead and get started. So I was reviewing news posted here on Channel 7 and Channel 9, and once again the governor has put out a safer at home description, and talking about where it's okay to go and where it's not. And got to give a shout out to Ben Armstrong this morning. His Freedom Friday episode, he really kind of brought back into light the idea that we live in a republic. We don't live in a socialist state. And to have one person in each state have the power to tell us where we can and can't go is a violation of our constitutional rights. And he had several people on this morning talking about it. So if you go to his blog or you go where you can watch the shows again, I'd really recommend getting out there and finding his show or contacting Ben and talking to him about what you hear, and decide whether you agree or disagree with it, because I do. I am not happy about the governor not seeking support from the legislature to shut this entire state down. On top of that, we still have no news from the legislature, from the assembly. There's nothing on our local news with anyone talking about this, from Scott FITZGERALD to Voss, anyone coming to light saying, okay, what are we going to do to help everybody that we've now impacted by shutting the entire state down? And they need to address it. And it's now April 3rd. And we still don't have anyone coming out and standing up. Now, you have to ask yourself that question that we've been hearing about since October. We have 3 people, we had 4 people, we have 3 people now wanting to provide leadership for this state and for District 7. And we've seen nothing in the form of leadership, except maybe if you count the fact that I'm still here trying to get so everybody to realize that if you're electing a leader, that person should be stepping up and saying, hey, why haven't we heard from the assembly? How are we going to help the people of Wisconsin weather this storm? Nobody's telling us when this is going to end. Nobody's telling us how we're going to help people who have just been simply laid off, have no health insurance, and are going to try to take care of their families. And anything that I've heard on the news of the leadership that's trying to say they're being leaders is just deferring. They're just doing things to say, well, it's an important issue. We realize it's critical, but hey, we're not going to make a decision. And it's now April 3rd. People are out of health insurance. They're off health insurance, and they're facing getting $370 a week. And nobody seems to want to respond to that. The only thing that seems to want to come out in the news is, hey, let's be all safer at home and let's all stay home and let's just go ahead and drive the economy even worse. And we have one person once again telling us where we can and can't go. And I will say one more time, shout out to Ben Armstrong on his show this morning for continuing to bring that to light, as I will, and to say it's unconstitutional. If we're really going to take this kind of position, they need to do a much better job of planning, and they need to, and Governor Evers needed to include the legislature in this decision, and then have a plan for how we were going to help all the people in Wisconsin, and we don't. And everybody is just waiting for something to happen. I'm going to say good morning to my people watching this morning. Please go ahead and respond. Always looking for some kind of response. Also, please go ahead and at some point I'll have this number memorized. Please go ahead and call in. Would love to hear from you. And I don't know why I can't find it. But can't. Call in at 715-352-0801. And I'd look forward to talking to you about any issues. But, more importantly today, I'd love to talk about, the constitutionality of what's going on and how we protect ourselves going forward. And what does this mean when we don't take a stand on it and the government wants to do it again? I mean, we just simply blindly walk along and let them do what they want to do and do nothing. So it's the control of the information right now is mind-boggling. And we're going to talk about that more later today. So again, nothing on Channel 9, nothing on Channel 7, nothing bringing out what's going to happen going forward. I mean, now Target is saying they're going to limit access to stores, and they're going to have their employees wearing masks. So, and yesterday, I called back to Aspire's hospital, and I have received no response. Even if they don't care about the show, I mean, I'm an individual calling for information about the hospitals and seeking information, and they are refusing to provide that information. So all we can do is trust that anybody bringing this information to us is telling us the truth. When in fact, I think we can all know that our Wausau hospitals are not overrun. Hospitals to the north of us here, all the way across the state to the north, are not overrun. Nobody's telling us if we're overrun down in Madison or Milwaukee. And I continue to try to ask that question, and they're just evasive. And we're going to give Senator FITZGERALD a call again here later in the show and find out why they haven't responded. It's simply just to tell us when they're going to convene again, when they're going to be back in session and they're going to be taking action. I asked that question last month, and Senator Petrowski and Representative Culp didn't have an answer. They were trying to do it over the phone. Now, they can be in session over the phone, but they didn't go back into a session last month. They should have been in session last month. They should still be in session. They should still be there finding out what they need to do to help the people here and to help us deal with whatever it is we're dealing with. Because again, I'm not convinced that what we're dealing with is what they're portraying it to be. And again, we're going to talk a little bit about that. So on that note, I've been doing a lot of research over the last week and watching a lot of videos. And when we talk about the spread of COVID-19, one of the things that keeps coming up is they keep showing a representative group, and they talk about people who are asymptomatic, people who are already immune, and they kind of faint at that, but they don't really talk about that. And if you were to think about what is going on, I think of the cruise ships. And I think of there's no better representative sample of a cruise ship carrying people who have been exposed. So, I have a little chart here we're going to work on today. And here, this is what they do. They make these little dots, and then they start to show what's important. And what's important is this dot matrix is just no COVID, no nothing. But we haven't said, is there a chance that their virus already exists? If you watch the video I have posted on my site with the German expert who is talking about the fact that, they already had the COVID virus under investigation over in the Wuhan area. My question is, didn't we? Are we saying that that's the only place in the world that studies viruses, studies the flu? I would imagine our CDC studies the flu. They're not talking about the COVID virus or the studies or what they've been doing over the years to study the flu. So how do we know who may or may not be immune when we start or already carrying the virus? So when you look at a chart like that, what they want to talk about is, all right, then I'm going to use red for the hotspot. So we're going to put, all of a sudden now, we have somebody that comes onto the cruise ship with the virus. And what they want us to believe is that it's just very quickly going to turn all of these dots red. And that's not true, because it didn't happen. or they're not telling us that that's what happened. They're not talking about the fact that you've got these cruise ships where if you listen to what they're saying, the virus could stay active and alive on a plastic surface, which there are tons of plastic surfaces on a cruise ship, for up to 3 days, meaning no matter what happens, as people are grabbing a cup or setting on something on a counter or touching a vanity or those types of things, then the virus should be being spread throughout the cruise ship. Putting their hand on the wall, putting their hand on somebody's shoulder, putting their hand on holding each other's hands. I mean, the interaction that occurs on a cruise ship is so close together. Based on what they're trying to portray to us, every single person should be sick. Or, in the effect, if we're saying that about 25%, go back to my data from yesterday. So, if we're saying 7.6% of tests are getting positive results, let's just say you've got about 1,500 people on a cruise ship. Then at least let's just say 7% of those people should be testing positive. So that would be roughly 150 people. And if those 150 people, 1.5% should be the mortality rate. So if we take 150 times 0.015, there should be 2 people dead on each of the ships. Now, if what they're saying is true in a confined environment like that, they should all be sick. So we should have, 1,500 people sick times times 0.015, is there should be more like 23 people dead on the ship. And that's not happening. And we don't have 150 people testing positive. We don't have the entire group testing positive. And what I'm hoping we can do is try to get these different ideologies together and say, what if instead there are people who are naturally immune, a certain percentage, right? So if you start drawing circles in blue, just at random in the group, saying this group of people, and we can keep it small, this group of people is already immune. They're not going to show symptoms, and they may not even be a carrier. They may not even be able to get through to a point where it could become contagious in their body. And when you watch some of the other videos out there, they talk about how that becomes a natural barrier. You can start drawing lines across these groups like this, that, as these people who are immune and the virus comes into contact with these immune people, then they will keep the virus from spreading as quickly as it would if there was nobody immune, if everybody's going to get it, if everybody's going to be sick. And instead, it starts to be contained. Now, that's why I'm saying, when we're thinking about what's being communicated to us, I'm not saying nobody's getting sick. I'm saying now if you take a spread rate of similar to the flu, because we don't know what the spread rate is here. They're talking about how the flu has an incubation period of maybe 4 days, and you're most contagious during those 4 days. So one person can probably infect 1.3 people, and so on and so forth during those 4-day periods. They're estimating this is 14 days. Even the information that I've been watching talks about how they don't know if they're actually contagious over those 14 days. So they don't even know the genome in terms of understanding, okay, so somebody gets COVID. When do they become contagious? When do they start showing symptoms? Do they stay contagious past those symptoms? Are they not contagious during the 14 days and only become contagious after they start showing symptoms? They have no way to know what that looks like, but they're just talking about the worst. So if this person makes 2 people sick and those people make 2 people sick, and then they run into the people who are immune, then it naturally gets contained. So when you think about New York, New York has one of the highest concentrations of people in the world. I mean, it is just full of people. So the idea that you would have larger groups that are not immune close to each other is very, very likely. And so you would see these high concentrations of people getting sick. It just is. But then you want us to believe that you don't have the hospitals there to take care of the number of people you have in the area. And so we're not getting enough of that information either. But yes, we obviously have terrible issues in these high concentration areas, but I think they need to do a little better planning, and they need to be communicating what the issues are with getting these people to other hospitals. And I just think that's a lack of planning, and that they just are not taking on a more aggressive approach as to how to get people to other hospitals, other clinics, making places for them to be so that they get proper health care. And why, again, I said this in my other shows, why again do we not have people going from Wisconsin to New York? If we have a problem in New York or LA or Florida, why are the doctors sitting here waiting for something to happen that's not happening either? We're not seeing the kind of spread here that they are in these hotspots. So we should be sending resources to those hotspots to help. So again, I think that, the continued lockdown of people is not going to last long. It's going to ultimately become an issue because people are only going to tolerate it for so long. And then they're going to be saying, okay, well, I'm done. I mean, I can't live my life in a box for the next year. That's just not going to happen. And we can't even probably sustain it for a couple of months. So we've got to be forecasting what we're going to do and how we're going to deal with the fact that people are going to continue to get sick, and we're going to have to help them get better. And we do it all the time. So we'll just have to hope that we'll start to see some better information coming out as to how we're going to deal with this. Hang on a second. Going to look something else up, of course, for the morning here. And it's interesting, there's a lot of different data coming out from different news organizations as to the number of cases. And if you go to the link that I have on other live videos that takes you to the cdc.gov site related to, and you can just search this, just say CDC case count, and you can go to a page that's updated as of yesterday, and they're saying the total cases as of yesterday were 213,144, with total deaths 4,513. And now we're saying that deaths have topped 6,000. There's some news reports out there. Deaths have topped 5,000 are reports out there. And I was trying to find a different site on the CDC that had more up-to-date information because that's not true unless the CDC is keeping data from us. This is as of April 2nd. Today is April 3rd. So I don't know where they're coming up with those values. So be careful in terms of what you're hearing. Go to the site. Go to my videos. This video at the end, when we finish final production on it, we'll have information in the description where you can go ahead and click through to this link and you'll be able to see that. Also, there's a link for the Wisconsin page. And so I'm going to go there next. So up to date here as of yesterday again, we have 20,317 negative test results and we have 1,730 positive test results. So we've done roughly 22,000 tests so far. There are 461 hospitalizations, and so the percentage tracking, positive test results or the total number of tests that have been done are still tracking at about 27%. So of the positive people in the state, only 27% are ending up in the hospital. Deaths are 31. It would be nice if the Wisconsin Department of Health started to break this data out and tell us who these people are. So, I mean, I don't know why they're not telling us the demographic. Is this 60 and over? Is it how many in, tell us how many young children, tell us how many in those age groups, 18 to 30, 20 to 30. I mean, whatever that does to help us to understand the demographic and then group them by underlying and non-underlying. So somebody perfectly healthy gets COVID-19, they end up in the hospital and they die. Okay, how many are there? And if it's one out of 461 hospitalizations, probably that's going to happen. I mean, and realistically, there's not a lot you're going to be able to do about it. I mean, the virus is out there, and it's always been out there in some form. So we're going to run into it, and we need to be prepared to understand how to be healthy. So what should you be doing right now? Make sure you're getting out walking. Make sure you're doing stuff for your body that helps you get stronger and be prepared to fight off the virus. So I've talked about taking some vitamins. I mean, just doing natural things that help you build your immune system and be able to fend off whatever comes your way. Because, even though we're talking about COVID, you could have the flu still. So you just get the regular flu. And who wants to get that? I mean, it's not fun to have the flu. It's not fun to have a cold. So it's only in your best interest for all the things that are going on in the season just to do what you can while you're not at work and stay healthy. So that's the best advice I have is stay healthy. And maybe you want to stop smoking, maybe you want to stop drinking, maybe you want to do things that help build your immune system and don't weaken your immune system. So some Dad Cup. All right, so we've gone over the CDC and Wisconsin latest numbers. The next thing I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about today the HR 748, which is the CARES Act that was passed by Congress. Officially today is the banks are going to start the part of the bill that is to help businesses and get businesses what they need to help keep people stay in business. And so I wanted to start talking about that a little bit today. So basically, Division A, and we're going to just kind of walk through this for a little bit. Division A is keeping workers paid and employed, healthcare system enhancements, and economic stabilization. So Title I, Keeping American Workers Paid and Employed Act. I've been reaching out because we own a business and we want to see how the SBA could help us with that business. And they're really not clear on how this program works, what they need to do, how much they're going to offer. So, be prepared that you're going to have to do some research, may have to call multiple banks, and you may need to help your bank understand what the act says and help work with the SBA to make sure you don't get disqualified and are eligible for the program. So Paycheck Protection Program, that's Section 1102 of the Act. And basically you've got all kinds of verbiage in here. And this portion is an agreement to participate in a loan on a deferred basis until the participation by the administration shall be 100%, and by adding the end of the following. So they're modifying a lot of different sections, so you got to kind of weed through this. And so, hang on. Paycheck protected loans, except as otherwise provided in this paragraph, the administrator may guarantee covered loans under the same terms, conditions, and processes as a loan made under this subsection. No later than 15 days after the date in which a loan is made under this paragraph, the administration shall register the loan using the TIN. So, what your employee information number or your tax information number that you have, which is 2 numbers dash and 8 numbers, you'll be providing that when you get the loan. They're also increasing out eligibility for certain businesses and organizations. Basically, this section, limits it to no more than 500 employees, which is a pretty big company. So while they say it's for small business, a lot of times you think that's mom and pop, and small business really isn't classified for mom and pop. Even mom and pop sole proprietorships, even though they may employ 50 or 100 people, are not really deemed small business. Small business is usually somewhere between 250 to 750 employees. And so, but they're going to expand how they're able to do this. And one of the ways they're doing that is they're going to be waiving the personal guarantees. They're going to be waiving requirements that they had out there when you try to go get an SBA before any of this has gone into place. And so documentation, an eligible self-employed individual, independent contractor, or sole proprietorship seeking a covered loan shall submit such document as is necessary to establish such individual as eligible, including payroll tax filings reported to the Internal Revenue Service, Forms 1099 MISC, and income and expense from the sole proprietorship as determined by the administrator and the secretary. And so waiver of affiliation rules, any business concern with not more than 500 employees, that is, as of the date of which the covered loan is dispersed, is assigned to North American Industry Classification System code beginning with 72. Any business concern operating as a franchise that is assigned a franchise identificator note. So they're defining that, and then they're defining employee. The maximum loan amount. During the covered period with respect to a covered loan, the maximum loan amount shall be the lesser of the sum of the product obtained by multiplying the average total monthly payments by the applicant for payroll costs incurred during the 1-year period before the date on which the loan is made, except that in the case of an applicant that is seasonal employer as determined by the administrator, the average total monthly payments for payroll shall be for the 12-week period beginning February 2019 or at the election of the eligible recipient, March 1, 2019, and ending June 30, 2019. And then they're multiplying that by 2.5. So that is basically how the loan is being processed. There's a lot of technical verbiage in here. They're not getting a lot of information at the bank level from the SBA yet because this is moving so fast. So I would encourage all of you to go ahead and get those applications in, get the process going. There is a clause in here that allows you to go ahead and request an emergency disbursement. So they'll disperse, I think the maximum is $10,000 to immediately, even before the loan is issued, under the idea that the loan will be approved. So there is some risk in that. But I think if you work with your bank and the SBA representative, you should be able to request that emergency disbursement. The loans can be used for item 1 is payroll costs, 2 costs related to continuation of a group health care plan, 3 employee salaries, 4 payments of interest on any mortgage obligation, 5 rent, 6 utilities, 7 interest on any other debt obligations that are incurred before the covered period. So they're limiting what you can do because another section that's in here, which we may not get to today, is there's a grant section, which means if you can apply after you get the loan for the grant portion, meaning anything that you do to keep employees, and if you keep those employees and pay them for the 2.5 months, that loan could turn into a grant that doesn't need to be repaid, which is a great opportunity. But you need to be careful because you can't lay anybody off. If you do or let people go, they'll reduce the amount of the grant, meaning then you'll be responsible to pay back that portion of the loan. Borrower requirements: an eligible recipient applying for a covered loan shall make a good faith certification. One, that the uncertainty of economic conditions makes necessary the loan request to support the ongoing operations, acknowledging that funds will be used to retain workers and maintain payroll, that eligible recipient does not have an application pending for a loan under this subsection for the same purpose, so you can't have multiple loans. During the period on February 15th, 2020, and ending on December 31st, 2020, that the eligible recipient has not received amounts under this subsection for the same purpose and duplicative amounts applied for or received under a covered loan. Fee waivers: in lieu of the fee otherwise applicable under paragraph 23A, the administration shall collect no fee. Otherwise applicable under another paragraph, which are obviously fees that SBA allows the banks to charge, they shall collect no fee. Then my credit union has told me, because we'll be applying today, that they're probably only going to do it for existing business customers, and that could be potentially because if they take in new customers, they're not going to make any money from working with that customer, which may or may not be the best way to handle it, but they're not sure. So like everything else, they're just trying to first cope with probably all of the businesses they have accounts with are probably going to apply for this loan. And that's a lot of work, and it'll be a staffing issue. Interest: a covered loan shall bear an interest rate not to exceed 4%. And then loan deferment. So, you can look for a deferment of payments as well to help you. Let's see. Then, they talk about secondary market. But I think what's important to understand is that you should apply for the loan. You should look to demonstrate that you're going to be keeping people employed. You can get up to 2.5 times the cost of that employment, which includes health insurance. And it may take you a little bit to find a bank that's going to be able to help you get the loan. So don't wait. You want to apply for this loan today. And the application process may be long, but the initiating application is very short. It's only 2 pages. And if you go online, we'll add that link as well today. If you go online or go to my videos, you should be able to see the click through to get to the application, and then fill that application out. It can go to any bank, that application, and get that application turned in. Some of the banks, I know my credit union, I'm going to be looking this morning, have indicated they want to have some kind of electronic process, meaning I can fill out that application. It's very short. It'll only take, really, if you have it done, if you have to do it online, it's only going to take maybe 20 minutes to fill it out and get it turned in so you can get the process started. So I would highly recommend no delay. All right. And then we will highlight other sections as we go. I did want to try to go to the section on the money that the government's saying they're going to be paying to us on April 13th, because I do know I've heard varying comments that, if you make more than $75,000, you're not going to get the same amount of money, and it would be phased out to $100,000. And I'm not seeing that in the bill. I mean, there are limitations, but they're much higher, especially if you're filing jointly. And so under Title II, Assistance for American Workers, Families, and Business, it talks about the unemployment section and the fact that they're going to provide an additional $600 a week for laid off employees. But do remember that even if you add that to the $370 that the state currently provides, that's $970 a week. And people are being asked to deal with an emergency, and if they were making $2,000 or $3,000 a week and now just don't have it, and companies are waiting to take on new employees, that's a huge disparity. And we still need to take care of those people who were unemployed, not at any fault of their own. Just bear with me. Scrolling down here. This bill's 840 pages long. And so sometimes it's a little difficult to get to where that section is. So under subtitle B, rebates and other individual provisions, subchapter B of chapter 65 of subtitle F of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 is amended by inserting after section 6427 the following new section: recovery rebates for individuals. In the case of an eligible individual, there shall be allowed as a credit against the tax imposed by subtitle A for the first taxable year beginning in 2020 an amount equal to the sum of $1,200, $2,400 in the case of eligible individuals filing a joint return, plus an amount equal to a product of $500 multiplied by the number of qualifying children, within the meaning of Section 24C of the taxpayer. The treatment of the credit. The credit allowed by subsection A shall be treated as allowed by subpart C of part 4 of subchapter A of chapter 1. So you probably need an attorney to read this. I sat up one night and read this, and I'm like, okay, not sure if I really truly understand this. Section C. Limitation based on adjusted gross income. The amount of the credit allowed by subsection A determined without regard to this subsection and subsection E shall be reduced but not below zero by 5% of so much of the taxpayer's adjusted gross income as exceeds $150,000 in the case of a joint return. So if you're married and you file jointly, you won't start seeing a reduction unless your income is higher than a combined of $150,000. $112,500 in the case of a head of household, and then $75,000 in the case of a taxpayer not described in paragraph 1 or 2. Meaning, basically what they're saying is, as an individual, you can make up to $75,000, and then it'll start to be reduced, and it'll be reduced by 5%. Gross income as it exceeds, and it's not telling us how, on what basis that 5% will be reduced. But again, there was information being disseminated by a representative in Congress saying that everyone who exceeds $75,000. Well, that's not really the case, because if one person makes more money than the other person in a household that's filing jointly, they're not saying we're going to penalize everybody at $75,000. So when you file jointly, if your combined income is less than $150,000, then there isn't going to be any reduction in that $1,200 check. And so you'd each receive $1,200, or as they say, it'll be $2,400. And also the same token with any reduction in the $500 for any of your children. Let's see, ineligible individuals, any non-resident alien individual. Oh, I'm sorry. For purposes of this section, the term eligible individual means any individual other than any non-resident alien individual, any individual with respect to whom a deduction under section 151 is allowable to another taxpayer for a taxpayer year beginning in the calendar year in which the individual taxable year begins, and an estate or trust. So you basically have to be a citizen filing taxes, and probably as well you'd be filed as a dependent if somebody's claiming you. So there will be some I guess some confusion in terms of how you're going to get this, because right now they're saying if you were set up in 2018 or for the 2019 tax year and you had a bank account, then they're going to be able to very quickly look at your taxes for 2018 if you don't have 2019 done, and just deposit it into the account that you have listed. Again, with the magnitude of releasing these dollars, it's going to be there's going to be some challenge, and they're saying if you have to do this by paper or you need to coordinate with the IRS, then you are probably going to be waiting up to 5 months to get the check. Now, they don't know that for sure, but they're just preparing people for the fact that don't be surprised if you don't get your check because obviously something got in the way. So now it talks about advancing the funds under Part F. Each individual who was an eligible individual for such individual's first taxable year beginning in 2019 shall be treated as having made a payment against the tax imposed by Chapter 1 equal to the advance refund amount for such taxpayer. So they're basically advancing this credit, and then you'll be filing that as part of your taxes. And then timing here, it says the Secretary shall subject to the provisions of this title, refund or credit any overpayment attributable to this section. Notwithstanding other provisions of the law, the Secretary may certify and disperse refunds payable under this subsection electronically to any account to which the payee authorized on or after January 1st, 2018, the delivery of a refund. Certification, any other provision of law with respect to any payment or refund under the subsection. A disbursing official in the executive branch of the United States government may modify payment information received from an officer or employee described in Section 3325A1B. And again, the language here is very, very cumbersome, and you got to kind of piece through it. But again, we'll have the link to the new bill available on our video, so please watch the video again or just go and look at the description and open it up, and you'll be able to get a link to the entire bill, and you can page through it, and if you need something for reference, that would be available through that. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, very well laid out, and would probably help you a great deal as you try to, wade through this nightmare. And I say nightmare because, as I talked about in the beginning of the show, number one, we're just stepping all over the Constitution. Number two, states aren't stepping up to help their citizens weather the storm, and we haven't even begun to deal with financial institutions in terms of, who's going to help their customers out and who's going to hold them to the fire and who's going to hold them to the wire. On that note, it was interesting. I was listening to a show, and they were talking about the three options banks will have in terms of forbearance on your mortgage. So the government has said federally backed loans need to be provided with the opportunity for forbearance. And so if you have a problem, you were laid off, you can go to your credit union or your bank, the federally backed loan, and get forbearance. Now, the interesting part of all this is they very quickly noticed and are identifying that the federal government didn't lay out a specific plan in their infinite wisdom of what the banks would be required to do with that forbearance. The first one, which was absolutely ridiculous that we saw come out of that interview, was that you just pay a lump sum at the end of 3 months. Yeah. Let's just say your mortgage is $800 and all of a sudden now you're behind $2,400 in payments, and the bank just says, okay, now we just need you to write us a check here in July for $2,400, because once they're outside of the window, then they could foreclose. So be very careful in agreeing to anything like that. The next idea that's being put out there is, we're not going to require a lump sum. That means we're going to need to finance that 24. So they're going to increase your mortgage, or they're going to give you a separate loan, or they're going to make you go find a different loan because maybe they don't find it a reasonable risk. I mean, you got to be careful. I mean, I went through this, and I'm sure many of you have as well, when we dealt with the mortgage debacle here in 2007 through 2010. And the banks weren't motivated to help us stay in our homes or keep our mortgages or help us with the mortgage. The third option that was brought up which is the simplest option, is to just simply tack it on at the end. So if your customer needed, or you needed, in this case, you're out there trying to get a forbearance, they should just simply say, yep, and we're just going to add the payments to the end. But that means they have to give up their revenue of interest for 3 months. So they're going to be hesitant to do that. Now, it's interesting, my wife and I have been talking about during that downturn in the recession in 2007 to 10, we had a loan with Ford Credit. And Ford Credit, they were just amazing. I mean, part of the reason we were able to not lose this item underneath this loan was that they had forbearance agreements, and it was simple. Twice a year, I could call and get a 1 month forbearance, and so it was basically every 6 months. So we timed it, and so basically it was somewhere in the summer and then right around the end of the year. And my wife and I talk about how we wouldn't have even been able to keep that asset had we not been allowed to gain that forbearance. And we not only kept the asset, but we kept it, paid it off, and then sold it much later. So it was part of our business, and we needed it, and it saved us through that many-year issue related to the downturn in the economy and the downturn in the industry we were in. And so it really shouldn't be a challenge for banks to understand that they need to just simply make it easy. If someone calls and says, I've been laid off, I'm concerned about being able to make my mortgage payment. The government has said that you need to provide a forbearance. So please, I'd like you to forbear this until I get a job, and or under whatever the guidelines are under the new bill. And they should just simply tack those payments on to the end of the loan and extend the loan. That would be the simplest thing to do. And everybody needs to start talking about it and sharing that idea out there so that everybody can work together to get through this and not have the same debacle we had. Because again, not being discussed. Well, what happens when people can't pay their mortgages? Are we going to simply allow the banks to just go free for all, taking homes, selling them at just huge discounts? One of the issues that has not been discussed for many years is the fact that banks had loans that were guaranteed. You were paying for mortgage insurance because maybe your credit wasn't very good, or you were a first-time home buyer. For whatever reason, insurance is taken out on a mortgage on a regular basis. It's a standard process for banks to, if based on your credit and your income or whatever other guidelines they have, you take out mortgage insurance. Well, nobody talked about the fact that the banks were not motivated to help you, keep your home, because by taking your home and foreclosing, they could collect on the insurance. Why do you think Bank One wrote a check for billions of dollars back after we gave the money to the banks instead of the people trying to pay their mortgage within 6 months? And nobody talks about that. And that's because they didn't need the money. Because not only did they get their principal, but they got all the interest they would have been paid for the life of the loan. They're not insuring the payment and the principal. They're insuring their investment in the loan, because that's what banks do. When they give you a 30-year mortgage, they're investing in you to pay it for 30 years. They really are. And they're going to show that income in their balance sheets and in their income statements, and future income anticipated based on all the different people they have mortgages with and all the different people they have loans with. And if we're going to be specific to mortgages, that's what they're going to do. And so it's important that we understand that, once again, if unchecked, the banks will need to get their money. And they will simply go back into foreclosure. And not only will we have the problems we're having with people not working and unemployment again, but once again, people's homes will be taken and home values will just plummet. So we need to be out in front of this. And the state legislature, again, is not coming up to speed and saying how they're going to protect homeowners from being foreclosed on, how we're going to get the money in the hands of the people so that the money flows through them, they make their payments, their credit isn't destroyed, their home isn't taken, they don't lose everything else because they can't pay their bills. The money doesn't belong going to banks and businesses. You need to funnel it through the people that pay those businesses, and the businesses need to work to get that money. That's how it works, not the other way around. The business has no motivation to do anything. We gave all that money to the banks, they did nothing. They foreclosed on everything. So we need to make sure we're doing things to help the consumer, help the individual, because that money will get to the businesses in the form of paying their mortgages, buying groceries, buying something they need for the house, having something fixed. That's the only way it works. Taking the consumer out of the equation just means the businesses stay in business and the employees lose everything. Or the people who maybe are retired and now the market's crashing, their house isn't worth as much. All these different variables impact everyone across the board, from being a worker to being retired to being independently wealthy. All of these things are impacted. So it's always through the consumer that the country flourishes, not through the businesses. Because without the consumer, there is no business. If there's nobody to buy anything, there's nothing to sell. So we have to do what we can to help people make sure they can make their payments until they can be strong in their work. I mean, salaried people will need to be protected, hourly people, because the hours will just be continued to be cut back. If this continues in the way they're talking about it and they keep disseminating this information that just makes people more and more scared and just trying to say that let's just all lock ourselves up in our homes, who knows how long this is going to last. Well, I'll get off my soapbox on that one. I think I've covered it well enough. I will be continuing in my shows every day to just pick sections of the bill to try to share with you any information I can that might apply to you, and make sure you have as much information as possible related to the bill and can capitalize on what that will be. I think tomorrow we'll talk about mortgages, and we'll talk about what the bill says about mortgages and forbearance, and continue to pursue that. On that note, I'm going to try to call Senator FITZGERALD's office again and see why they're not returning my call or my email. So let's go ahead and do that.
Reached the office of State Senator Scott FITZGERALD. I'm sorry that no one is available to take your call. Please leave your name, phone number, time you called, and a brief message, and we will return your call just as soon as possible. Again, thanks for calling. Record your message at the tone. When you are finished, hang up or press pound for more options.
Hi, this is Michael OPELA with my show, Here's My Issue. I called yesterday and you gave me the name for Alex Zimmerman, and I reached out to Alec yesterday and never heard back. So I'm trying to, again, reach out to gain any information we can about when the Assembly will be back in session and what their plans are to help the residents of Wisconsin keep their homes, make sure their income's protected, while the governor acts as if you want to say it, a dictator here and steps all over the Constitution and forces us to stay in our homes. So if you could give me a call back, 715-614-0330, that would be great. Thanks. Bye. All right. Once again, there's no answer, and I know they're there. And I will try to call them yet today and call a couple other individuals on the Assembly today and see if I can get somebody to agree to be on the show tomorrow. And again, I'll be following up with Aspires Health. So once again, thank you for joining the show. And I want to thank you, if you're still watching the show, for spending the time with me today. Your time's important. I appreciate the fact that you're here with me today. If you watch this video at a later time and you've watched to this point, please subscribe and please like the video. Please go to the links and join me on Facebook and Twitter. And let's just keep building the audience and building the community and getting the word out. And as always, stay safe, stay strong, stay healthy. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great day.